Are you a gatherer? Are you somebody who comes back from walks with your pockets bulging with picked up seed heads or beautiful shells or pieces of sea glass? If so, this film is for you. Welcome to the Studio YouTube channel. It's really lovely to have you here. My name is Jane. And the reason that I'm talking about all of this kind of beachcombing and foraging and things this week is that at the moment in the studio, which is my online community, we are talking about exactly this kind of thing. This season we are looking at an old folk tale. It's an Irish traveller's tale. It's called The Women Who Gather, and it is all about these women who go through the lanes and over fields, and they are looking for tiny wisps of fleece that are stuck to the thorny bushes, so whitethorn and blackthorn and hawthorn and gorse. And they are collecting all of these tiny slivers together, putting them into a basket on their back, and then spinning that into yarn. And this is what we're exploring in the studio at the moment. And one of the things that we do in the studio is we have a live every Friday, so 5 o'clock UK time. So it's sort of the end of my working week. It's always a lovely way to end the week. And we bring, a cup of tea, cup of coffee, and we talk about things that people have seen or things that they're working on. It's very conversational. And one of the studio members was on holiday. She actually zoomed in from her camper van in the northeast of England in Whitby. She was staying near Whitby, and she had been on a beach walk. The beaches are just gorgeous there. And she'd come back to her camper van with a great pile of sea glass. So glass that had ended up in the sea, possibly hundreds of years ago, some of it, and it has been tumbled against rocks and seabed until it becomes round-edged and translucent. And she had 3 piles. She had a pile of sort of very pale aqua green, and she had a pail of the cream one, which becomes kind of like frosted. And then she had one piece of Bristol blue sea glass, which is a really dark blue. It was used for medicine bottles in the past, and probably for other things as well, but it's much rarer than the green and the white. She was just so pleased to have found it, to have discovered amongst all of this sand and shells and pebbles, this tiny speck of beautiful blue. So this week's film is inspired by that, and I want to explore what it is about this kind of activity, the beachcombing and the foraging and the picking up of natural objects, taking them home, that adds so much to our lives and our well-being and our delight. And I've sort of broken it up into 4 different things for this, and so I'll go through. The first one, which you're probably not going to be surprised at, is connected to prehistoric times, to the times that we as a species were hunter-gatherers, and where your survival depended very much on these skills that allow you to look at something and see specific items. The ripest berries, the most delicious leaves, the nuts, all of these kinds of things, and to make very fine judgments. Now, often we think of there being, a hunter-gatherer society, and then after that, an agricultural society. But that doesn't take into account that gathering continued to be vitally important right up to the early 19th century, so 1820s. In the 1820s, there was kind of like a big survey thing done. It was estimated that 10% of a rural family in England's income, right, was made up of foraged items or things from the commons. So that would be things like the fleece that was picked from the hedges. This was an actual thing. Women and children would collect fleece and they would use it to stuff mattresses or to make yarn for themselves. Very expensive for much of history. Also included things like gleaning, which was going on to a field or into an orchard or a nuttery and collecting the things that had not, sort of after the main crop had been harvested. And of course, at that time, it was much less efficient than combine harvesters. It would be people with scythes. So the gleaning, that ability to see on the ground and pick up grain by grain by grain, was vitally important to people, and particularly to elderly women. And this is kind of acknowledged by the fact that they had more rights to forage than anybody else. They were kind of like given longer times and more access because it was vitally important to their lives. It was the difference between surviving and not surviving. So I think that this part of our brains was really hyper developed for thousands and thousands of years. And our brains just love going back to it. Now we don't tend to be going through the fields after a combine harvester. There'll be very little left. And we're not surviving on it. But we have this other thing, this beachcombing or picking up beautiful seed cones, all of that kind of thing that fulfills that same part of our brain. And I think that leads on to the second thing, which I am keeping slightly distinct, and that is how good it is for mindfulness. Now, I do tend to think that we're told everything is mindfulness. It's one of the most marketed things, isn't it? Mindfulness. But this scanning for things reduces the frequency of your brainwaves. It brings on a kind of a vague attention. You're not striving. You've not got a target. You're just looking at the seashore or the forest path, whatever, to pick out things. So if, for example, I'm looking for oak galls, which are the galls that are made by a kind of wasp, and they're on oak trees, and they fall, and you can find them at Loch Lomond, but they will just be in amongst the oak leaves. And you've got to get your eye in. And you first look and you can't see anything. I gather it's the same with mushrooms. You can't see anything. And then you just keep looking and you keep looking. And then suddenly your eye gets in and it spots the pattern change. And the fact that it's not a leaf, it's a little bit of a round thing. You can find them. And that is so mindful. It's not something you can do while checking your phone. It's not something that you can do while looking at Instagram. It's kind of a focus, but very vague. I think that's one of the reasons that it's so rejuvenating when we go beach walking. And the third thing, is probably to do with marketing, is there is something almost rebellious about it. Now again, I'm not that keen on our modern tendency to say that everything is, a rebel or guerrilla or whatever. But there is something about valuing, for example, that tiny speck of blue sea glass as a precious object that is so deeply anti-consumerism that it is kind of rebellious for our dominant culture. Our dominant culture is that you can buy the things that are valuable, whereas apart from some Etsy listings, sea glass is something that you find yourself, and that the preciousness is to do with your experience of finding it. Or seed heads, or feathers. They have no intrinsic value in our consumerist society. And yet, they are precious to me in a way that is way beyond anything I could buy. So I think that there is this going on, that we get to choose what it is that is precious to us, and to move that outside the capitalist society, the consumer drive to put a price on everything. And then the fourth thing is, I think it teaches us to look for beauty, and to look for a wide range of beauty. This is again something that we're looking at in the studio. Where can we find beauty in unpromising situations? Or where can we find beauty that is slightly blotchy or decayed or broken? And how can we train ourselves to really look at that and recognize that and celebrate it? And I think that when we're collecting natural objects where there is, a kink in the stem, or blotches, or things have eaten some seed heads, or the feathers have got the tips missing, or whatever it is, to take these things and to really look at them and treasure them and appreciate them and expand our sense of what is beautiful. I think that's a really valuable thing. And it's interesting, I think there are other things that are going on with this that are maybe more to do with connecting ourselves and the rest of the world in a way that are reconnecting, really, because we have been encouraged to see ourselves as separate for a few hundred years. And I think that this draw, really, to surround ourselves with natural beauty is a symptom of our need to reconnect. And as I was sort of thinking about this and taking some shots for the B-roll that has gone over it, I realised that in my home, it is almost all ringed with things that I have picked up on walks over the past 32 years. Things that I have treasured and that have moved home with me. Things that are arranged and rearranged. And I think that there is something going on there. They make me feel safe. Most of the pieces I could pick up and tell you exactly where I found them. They connect me back to that place. They are beautiful. And I'd love to know about other gatherers. What do you collect? Do you have it on show? Do you have it tucked away? Is it snaking around all of the windowsills as it is here? Let me know. And if you fancy continuing this conversation further and also learning how to make felt beads, I mustn't forget that, all the details of the studio are underneath this, and you would be very, very welcome to join us. And until next Friday, bye-bye.